Family and fellow soldiers, I'm the Professor, and this is the Moment of Truth. And now the Friday Crime Report. Oklahoma City, Monday, April 21st, 2024. Jonathan Candy was married to Lindsay Candy. They had 4 children, Dylan, age 18, Ethan, 14, Lucas, 12, and an unnamed 10-year-old son. From all outward appearances, they were living the suburban dream. Expensive house, he was employed as a video engineer and worked at the Paycom Center, that's the home of the NBA Oklahoma City Thunder. One person called them the typical all-American family. He was absolutely right, though not for the reasons he might have thought. Sometime overnight on the evening of April 21st, Jonathan Candy got into an argument which became an altercation with his wife. Jonathan then went and got a gun and shot his wife dead. Afterwards, he then went through the house and executed 3 of their 4 sons, Dylan Candy, Ethan, and Lucas. Jonathan Candy then turned the gun on himself. None of the neighbors called the police. In fact, nobody reported anything until the morning of April 22nd, when the Candy's 10-year-old son woke up and found his entire family dead. Police say the 10-year-old slept throughout the entire horrific ordeal and that Jonathan Candy, for whatever reason, didn't kill the child. The 10-year-old was the one who called 911. Police reported that they found 5 bodies scattered throughout the house. 2 of the family members were found upstairs, and the other 2 were on the ground floor. At least one of the 3 children was killed in their bed. The 10-year-old has since been placed to live with his uncle. Over a week later, it's still a mystery why Jonathan Candy slaughtered his entire family. Oklahoma City police say that they had received no calls to the residence prior, that there was no history of domestic abuse reports. And already the effort to play the sad violin for the murderer has begun. White media outlets have reported things such as a neighbor who said that Jonathan admitted to him that he suffered from depression. Jonathan Candy's family members put out a statement about him in which they called him goofy. I'm not making that up. That's how they described him. Well, actually, the description was, Jonathan was one whose jokes and goofy attitude kept everyone smiling. Aside from these events, his children and wife were his entire life. You get that? They actually had the nerve to write that. He always told the best jokes. He kept everyone smiling, and aside from the quadruple homicide he committed, his wife and his kids were his life. Yeah, they were his life, all right. That is, until he ended their lives and his own. Always trying to rehabilitate these killers, the white media can always be counted on for that. If it ain't the white media doing it, it's somebody else. Goofy. As if they didn't know that he had just murdered his entire family, with at least 2 of his victims being children and one of them barely 18 years old. This is part of the problem. Part of the socially permissive environment that leads monsters like this Candy character to think that whatever he does isn't truly wrong, because this society is only too ready to try to humanize monsters like him, even after they've committed some of the most inhuman acts imaginable. But the story of the Jonathan Candy quadruple homicide happens to dovetail closely with another incident that's come to light. Alexis Aldemir is a 69-year-old resident of Boston. She had worked at an accounting firm since 1980 until her retirement in 2021. During that time, she had lived in a condominium. She had married a man who the authorities haven't named, and she had 5 children by him. It's worth noting that they chose to give up their last child for adoption. Now, this man died in 2011. 2 years ago, in August of 2022, police were summoned to Aldemir's residence after reports of a noxious gas odor coming from her residence were made. Aldemir was hospitalized and during this time diagnosed with Alzheimer's dementia. She was put into a long-term care facility in October of 2022. Aldemir's sister said that Alexis's mental decline had been shockingly precipitous. Only a few weeks later, on November 17th, Aldemir's brother and his wife went to Alexis's condo to clean the unit. When they opened the freezer, they found the bodies of 4 dead babies, frozen solid. The bodies had been put in shoeboxes wrapped in tinfoil. All the bodies were described as full term and with the umbilical cord still attached. Investigators were unable to find any sort of record showing that Aldemir had given birth to any children, though a court-ordered DNA test did confirm that she was the birth mother of the 4 dead babies. White media reports are that her co-workers had no idea that she had ever been pregnant. Because the bodies had been in the freezer, the medical examiner said there was no way to be sure how long the children had been dead or whether they had been born alive, much less to establish a date of birth. The medical examiner was unable to establish a cause of death either. He said that there were no signs of internal or external trauma and no evidence of obvious injuries. Investigators had tried to interview Aldemir in late 2022, but she reportedly appeared to be confused and showed a lack of understanding of where she was and who she was speaking with. Reports are that Alexis had been in a locked ward and is taking antipsychotic medications. Her condominium unit has since been put up for sale. Now here's where things get interesting, or rather typical. The DA out there has announced that he's not going to be bringing charges against Aldemir. Yeah, 4 dead children and no charges are going to be brought. And what reason did he give? He said they'll never know exactly what happened to the 4 babies and that prosecutors must weigh ethical concerns in charging decisions. Never know what happened to the babies? I'm pretty sure that it wasn't some complete stranger who put those 4 infant corpses in her freezer. Now, I'm sure that there's a lot of black defendants, though, many of whom are sitting in prison for crimes they didn't even commit, who will be surprised to hear a prosecutor saying that he has to weigh ethical concerns before he can bring any charges against someone. Now, since when have prosecutors ever been so reluctant to charge somebody? Well, when the person in question isn't black, suddenly a completely different set of rules applies. Prosecutors begin asking if bringing charges is the right thing to do, not whether they could get a conviction or not. You'll notice that the prosecutor didn't even say a word about the chances that he could put her in prison for this. Instead, it's all about whether he should even charge her, whether or not it's the right thing to do. Prosecutors have said that due to her mental state, Alexis Aldemir would most likely never stand trial. He never says a word about how the babies came to be in that freezer. I guess that doesn't matter. And just like with Jonathan Candy, the white media makes sure to give a paragraph devoted entirely to humanizing Alexis Aldemir. They say that her co-workers described her as a hard worker who rarely took vacations. Always talk about how they were hard-working, just like the Las Vegas mass shooter. Nothing about people who were ever creeped out by her or by Jonathan Candy. Nothing about any arguments or altercations they had had with other people. These mass murder stories always turn into some sort of human interest story by the time the white media is done talking about it. Instead of an atmosphere of hostility for these kind of incidents, instead the white media tries to promote an atmosphere of understanding. And that's what lays at the very root of the problem. Why does the United States have so many mass killings? It's a cultural problem, but one that the society aids and abets. Ignoring warning signs, being lenient with clear-cut cases of murder, and being diligent and thoughtful when dealing with people who stuff babies' corpses in their freezers, and breaking the law when dealing with black folks. These stories don't get the wall-to-wall coverage that they should. I'm sure a lot of you didn't have any idea that these atrocities had happened until I just told you about them. Sure, we're going to be hearing a lot about shootouts in the Carolinas, but handfuls of dead children, even dead babies, well, they just sweep that under the rug. There's no conversation to be had about this kind of thing. No national conversation needs to be started on this. But then again, why would they? It's the American way. This society decided a long time ago that it would much rather lose the lives of children, even babies, before it risks losing that all-important privilege. And that's this week's Friday Crime Report. Keep your eyes open and stay on alert, because there's a lot worse criminals out there than the ones the white corporate media chooses to show you. Good day, and be one. I'd like to take a moment to mention some of our contributors. Lisa Taylor, Rebellious Zoe, Tajadeen Aleem, Yamuka H., and Eve. Salute to them and thank you to everyone for listening, liking, and sharing this message. Black empowerment only exists because of you.